After the miraculous work of salvation, God continues a process of transformation, or transforming the believer into the image of Christ. Sanctification is a process of turning from sin and toward holiness with a goal of leading a sinless life. Perseverance means that God will enable the believer to remain in the faith through the remainder of his whole life. God will enable, energize, uphold the believer, and sustain the believer to remain in the faith through the remainder of his or her life, while glorification will be accomplished in the life to come, when we will become all that God intends for us to be. Sanctification. The beginning of salvation, as we looked at previously, is both complex and profound. Yet they are not the end of God's special working to restore his children to the likeness to him for which they are destined. Having begun this work of transformation, he continues and completes it in the process of sanctification. Sanctification. The meaning of sanctification is the continuing work of God in the life of the believer, making him or her actually holy. By holy here is meant bearing an actual likeness to God. Sanctification is a process by which one's moral condition is brought into conformity with one's legal status before God. It is a continuation of what was begun in regeneration, when the newness of life was conferred upon and instilled within the believer. In particular, sanctification is the Holy Spirit applying to the life of the believer the work done by Jesus Christ. There are two basic senses of the word sanctification, which are related to two basic concepts of holiness. The first is holiness as a formal characteristic of particular objects, persons, and places. In this sense, holiness refers to a state of being separate, set apart from the ordinary or mundane, and dedicated to a particular purpose or use. In the Old Testament, particular pieces, especially the holy place, particular places, especially the holy place and the Holy of Holies, objects like Aaron's garments and the Sabbath day, and persons, the priests and the Levites, were specially set apart or sanctified to the Lord. This sense of sanctification is found in the New Testament as well. Peter refers to his readers as a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people. 1 Peter 2 verse 9. Here, being sanctified means to belong to the Lord. Sanctification in this sense is something that occurs at the very beginning of the Christian life, at the point of conversion, along with regeneration and justification. It is in this sense that the New Testament so frequently refers to Christians as saints, even when they are far from perfect. Paul, for example, addresses the persons in the church at Corinth in this way. 1 Corinthians 1 verse 2. Even though it was probably the most imperfect of the churches to which he ministered. The second sense of holiness or sanctification is moral goodness or spiritual worth. This sense godly came to predominate as it designates, came to predominate as it dominate, to predominate. It designates not merely the fact that believers are formally set apart or belong to Christ, but that they are then to conduct themselves accordingly. They are to live lives of purity and goodness. In order to focus more sharply the nature of sanctification, it will be helpful to contrast it with justification. There are a number of significant differences. One pertains to duration. Justification is an instantaneous occurrence, complete in a moment, whereas sanctification is a process requiring an entire lifetime for completion. There's a quantitative distinction as well. One is either justified or not. One is either justified or not, whereas one may be more or less sanctified. That is, there are degrees of sanctification, but they're not degrees of justification. You're not justified or you're not justified. You're not born again, you're not born again. You're regenerated or you're not regenerated. But with sanctification, there are degrees. Justification is a forensic or declarative matter, while sanctification is an actual transformation of the character and condition of the person. Justification is an objective work affecting our standing before God, our relationship to Him, while sanctification is a subjective work affecting our inner person. In the next section, we look at the characteristics of sanctification. Blessings.